From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Proud nation of Iran, I congratulate you on your epic presence, your committed and meaningful involvement in the elections, on your fulfillment of your religious and national duty response to the call of the leader of the revolution.
In what's being hailed as a victory for reform, the cleric Hassan Rouhani has won Iran's presidential election. We'll speak with Reza Marashi of the National Iranian American Council. Then unrest continues in Turkey.
Prime Minister Erdogan is provoking people for a civil war, but even people who voted for him do not buy this, so he is creating an oppressive regime.
We'll go to Istanbul, where a general strike is underway, led by unions, doctors and others, calling for an end to the police crackdown on protest. Then to Hong Kong, where hundreds rallied in support of NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
When you have this spying program, you can see, how long people are speaking to whom and where and who to, and this makes it very difficult to have that mechanism within democracy. So he says he's not a hero or a traitor and he's just a regular citizen, and I think we agree today, and we're going to be standing in solidarity with him and hoping that rule of law in Hong Kong is upheld.
We'll speak with a protest organizer and with a member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council who specializes in internet technology. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. U.S. intelligence agencies have officially confirmed the surveillance programs exposed by whistleblower Edward Snowden. In a letter to Congress released Saturday, U.S. officials said the blanket collection of phone records and the spying on foreigners' internet usage are covered under Section 215 of the Patriot Act and Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act. The National Security Agency also says it investigated less than 300 phone records seized in the broad collection of metadata last year. The NSA claims the monitoring has foiled terror plots in the U.S. and 20 other countries, but has not provided any details. The phone records program has been in effect since 2006. According to the Washington Post, FISA courts have renewed orders for the bulk collection of metadata every 3 months since May of that year from companies including AT&T and Bell South. The court orders were prompted by a request from an unspecified telephone provider after warrantless surveillance was exposed. The company apparently asked the Bush administration to come up with the order so it was legally bound to comply. Edward Snowden is believed to remain in Hong Kong as he faces an ongoing U.S. investigation. On Saturday, a group of demonstrators braved heavy rain in a show of support for him.
He says he's not a hero or a traitor and he's just a regular citizen, and I think we agree today, and we're going to be standing in solidarity with him and hoping that rule of law in Hong Kong is upheld.
Today, there are many Hong Kong people coming out to defend the basic democratic rights of Snowden because he has exposed the truth, the secrets from the U.S. government. And now it is really our responsibility to come out and to defend his democratic rights, not only his, but also the democratic right of us.
Revelations continue to emerge from the NSA files Edward Snowden disclosed. The Guardian of London reports the British government conducted extensive surveillance on foreign diplomats attending the 2009 G20 summit in London. Britain's NSA counterpart, the GCHQ, established fake internet cafes to spy on foreign delegates' computer use. The agency also hacked into officials' BlackBerries to monitor their emails and phone calls. The NSA played a role in the operation by sharing information on the phone calls of Russian leader Dmitry Medvedev. Other targets included British government allies such as South Africa and Turkey. The spying appears to have been spurred by the British government's desire for an advantage in the G20 talks. An internal briefing paper said the GCHQ's intent was to provide, quote, intelligence relevant to the government's desired outcomes for its presidency of the G20. The news comes just as Britain's hosting the G8 summit, which begins today. All G8 members belong to the G20, and the latest revelations are likely to fuel tensions. Ahead of the G8, thousands of people marched in Northern Ireland near where the two-day summit is being held.
Well, G8 has come, and for every action there's a reaction. Our reaction is you need to listen to the people. There's a chance for a better world here. The way you're doing it isn't working and it isn't fair.
We're here for our kids today to teach them how to protest peacefully against what we see are greedy fat cats who are here to take over this small part of the world and all over the world.
On Sunday, Amnesty International staged a rally for the closure of Guantanamo Bay outside a Belfast venue where President Obama is speaking today. Amnesty spokesperson Patrick Corrigan said Guantanamo's continued existence undermines Obama's credibility on global issues.
And we say to President Obama, come here, support our peace, but support peace and the rule of law internationally by closing Guantanamo and ceasing the breaches of international law. Then we can take you more seriously as a global leader.
At least 10 Syrian soldiers have been killed in a bombing of a military checkpoint in Damascus. 10 others were wounded. Syria is expected to dominate talks at today's G8 summit in Ireland. As world leaders arrived today, Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the U.S. for last week's decision to arm Syrian rebels, saying the aid will go to fighters who eat human flesh. Putin was referring to an infamous video that circulated last month of a Syrian rebel biting into the organ of a dead Syrian soldier. At the United Nations, outgoing U.S. Ambassador Susan Rice defended the decision to arm Syrian rebels and played down speculation the U.S. will seek to impose a no-fly zone on Syria.
Our intelligence community has high confidence that chemical weapons, including sarin, have been used by the government against the opposition on multiple occasions over the course of the last year, on a small scale. On the issue of a no-fly zone, we have been clear that we're not excluding options, but at this stage no decision has been taken. And as my colleagues in Washington described at some length yesterday, that option has some downsides and limitations that we're very well aware of and will factor into any decision.
Days after announcing plans to arm Syria's rebels, the White House now says U.S. warplanes and anti-missile batteries will be stationed in neighboring Jordan. The planes and batteries have been deployed there for joint military drills, but will now remain indefinitely. The new U.S. weapons will likely be delivered to the Syrian rebels through the CIA's ongoing operations in Jordan. The Egyptian government's announced it's severing all ties to the Syrian government and backing the rebel fight seeking to oust Bashar al-Assad. On Saturday, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi told supporters he's closing the Syrian embassy in Cairo and recalling his government's envoy from Damascus.
The Syrian people are facing a campaign of extermination and planned ethnic cleansing, fed by regional and international states who do not care for the Syrian citizen. The people of Egypt support the struggle of the Syrian people, materially and morally. And Egypt, its nation, leadership, and army, will not abandon the Syrian people until it achieves its rights and dignity.
In his comments, President Morsi also called on the international community to enforce a no-fly zone over Syria and urged all Hezbollah members fighting alongside Assad's forces to return to Lebanon. In response, the Syrian government said Morsi has joined, quote, the conspiracy and incitement led by the United States and Israel against Syria, unquote. The U.S. has denied pressuring Egypt on Syria. One of Turkey's leading unions is staging a national strike today in protest of the crackdown on nearly 3 weeks of protests. More than 800,000 workers are believed to be taking part. The strike follows a weekend that saw the protests' worst violence to date. On Sunday, around 400 people were arrested as police used tear gas, water cannon, and rubber bullets in the streets of Istanbul, Ankara, and other cities. Medics treated wounded demonstrators were among those detained. On Sunday, Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan told a massive crowd of supporters the opposition is attempting minority rule over the majority that he enjoys.
Minorities are trying to rule over the majority. The privileged are trying to dominate victims, and they are trying to regain their privileges. We know what is truly behind the dirty games that they play as they pretend to care for trees, the environment, and Gezi Park. We know those who are trying to undermine the people's will. We know them well. We won't pave the way for those who are in search of certain options other than elections. We won't give them the opportunity.
In his remarks, Erdogan also singled out the foreign news outlets for their reporting on Turkey's crisis, accusing them of lying. We'll have more from Turkey later in the broadcast. At least 33 people were killed and more than 100 wounded Sunday in a wave of attacks across Iraq. 12 more died in 3 separate attacks earlier today. Around 2,000 Iraqis have been killed in sectarian violence since April, making this the country's bloodiest period in 5 years. Iran has elected former nuclear negotiator Hassan Rouhani as the new president, replacing Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Rouhani is considered a moderate compared to the other candidates. He took over half the vote in a national turnout of 72%. Rouhani has called for greater engagement with Western countries while urging respect for Iran's right to nuclear energy. On Sunday, White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough called Rouhani's election a, quote, potentially hopeful sign. We'll have more on the Iranian elections after headlines. North Korea is offering negotiations with the U.S. after months of tensions. On Sunday, the North Korean regime proposed high-level talks at a date and venue of Washington's choice. The proposal reaffirms North Korea's long-standing call to tie any reduction of its nuclear arsenal with broader regional denuclearization, including by the United States. It comes on the heels of multiple North Korean threats to launch attacks on the U.S. as the U.S. conducted war games with South Korea. The Obama administration is expected to announce today the appointment of a new envoy to head the effort to close Guantanamo Bay. Clifford Sloan, a Washington lawyer, has been tapped to head the State Department's Office of Guantanamo Closure. The office has been idle since January after the administration effectively abandoned the closure effort. More than 100 Guantanamo prisoners remain on a hunger strike to protest their indefinite imprisonment. Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino is in Britain for talks on the diplomatic standoff over WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. This week marks 1 year since Assange took refuge inside Ecuador's London embassy to avoid extradition to Sweden. On Sunday, Patino and Assange met before an audience of supporters.
How are you? Hello. I'm good. Good to see you. Lovely to see you. I see we have such an audience. It's a bit overwhelming. I'm not used to certain. My situation here has been physically difficult. But the staff at the embassy have all been kind and supportive, despite the occasional entertainment outside, whether they are people chanting or policemen coming down on ropes.
Patino is expected to meet with British Foreign Secretary William Hague during his stay to discuss Assange's case. Federal officials are reportedly investigating after 2 blasts at Louisiana chemical plants on Thursday and Friday. The second explosion killed 1 worker and left 7 people wounded at a site producing nitrogen. Gun violence was rampant in Chicago over the weekend with the shootings of at least 36 people. 7 were killed. The violence followed Friday's 6-month anniversary of the Newtown massacre. And the Supreme Court is in the final 2 weeks of its current term with a number of high-profile decisions still ahead. The court's expected to first rule on the case of a white Texas student challenging affirmative action in college admissions. A decision is also expected on a challenge to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which requires several states and counties with a history of racial discrimination to clear election-related changes with the federal government. The court will also decide on 2 landmark cases challenging federal and state laws that restrict gay marriage rights, the Defense of Marriage Act and California's gay marriage ban, Proposition 8. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.